Welcome to the Caseload IEP Progress Chart, where you can enter your entire caseload onto one table with 3 required fields: the student name, the goal number, and a goal description. Once your entire caseload is entered onto the table, then you can go into the chart and select the student that you need to report on, up to 5 goals, and then you'll get a progress chart that's ready to print. In addition, you also have the option to record your caseload onto a 3-month table where it has, again, the 3 required fields: student name, the goal number, and the goal description. This chart will allow you to enter the average for the month, which will produce a chart that will display the progress over a 3-month period. So let's take a look. So once you open the folder, you'll see the option for weekly or 3-month caseload. Let's take a look at the weekly caseload chart. Here are your required fields: the student name, the goal number, and the goal. Because this file has the capacity to produce a data collection template, you would also want to summarize your IEP goal into the most important parts of the goal so that you can have a data collection template that's available for you to record data during your sessions. I've included an instructions tab that I'll go over in detail later, but first let's take a look at how this file works. First, what you'll want to do is click into this cell here and choose a date that represents your first day of work. So if the first day of school is, let's say, August 25th, then the dating sequence here will automatically be updated. It will highlight to show you the current month based on today's date, so the weeks for September are highlighted. This row here represents the week number, and it has capacity for 52 weeks. Based on the date that you selected here, regardless of the day of the week that you start, the calendar here will always reset so that it goes from Monday to Monday. So if your start date was August 19th on a Thursday, Monday of that week would be August 16th, and that's the first date that will be available here for you. This information down here, although it looks blank, contains formulas that are updating the dates based on your selection here. Whenever you start, even if it's in the middle of the year, enter here your very first work date and set the calendar dates. And then once you start entering data onto the table, don't change this date, because as you see, the dating sequences will shift. Here I have some sample data. This first student has 5 goals. And as you enter your entire caseload onto this table, you can copy and paste the full IEP goal and enter it here. Once you put the full description here, when it's time to produce a report, the chart will automatically update once you select the student, which we'll take a look at later. And here you can put a brief description of the IEP goal so that when you print out your data collection template, it fits nicely onto your page. Then, of course, you enter the data for that particular goal for that session date in the appropriate space. This cell here allows you to highlight a student that's on your table. This is helpful when you have a lot of students on your caseload and you need to find a particular student so you can add their data. The rows that you need to edit will be highlighted so you can see them easier. And if, for example, you're entering information further down on the chart, to make it a little bit easier, you can just hide the columns before and or after so that it's easier to see the information that you need to enter. If you have 2 students with the same first name, I would enter the last name initial, and then if you wanted to highlight that student, you can select the name on the drop down and it will highlight just that student. If you type into this box here only the first name, it's going to find all of the instances on your table that have that in this column here. So all of your students with the first name of David will be highlighted. So you have the option of doing a search either way. So let's take a look at this data to see how it would look on the chart if we have an IEP report coming due. Let's click into the chart tab. The chart is made up of your dashboard that's on this left side here. You don't need to print this. This is for you to generate your reports. And then this is the side that you would print and bring with you to your meeting. So let's take a look. Select that student. This drop-down can become very long, so in order to save time, just click into the cell and start typing the student's name, and you'll see the list shorten. And this student has 5 goals. As I'm making the selection in this row here, this section here is automatically populating. So I don't ever need to touch anything in this section here, but I will need to hide sections where there is no data. So now that the dashboard is showing the information that I need, I can look over here to the report section, and I'm going to expand these hidden rows. There's a huge empty space here, which represents data that hasn't yet occurred. And if you look to the chart, you can see where your data ends. And just highlight those rows on the side, right-click, and choose Hide Rows. And that's going to hide that data, and it's going to take it off of the chart. And now the chart is formatted nicely. The IEP goals that you have entered over here on this column will automatically be brought in based on your selection in these cells here. So when it's time to report on progress, you don't have to retype the goals here. They're automatically brought in for you. Now that my chart is displayed correctly, I can highlight the area that I want on my printout and print out just the selected cells, and then you can format it to your preference. To choose another student, I can delete the drop downs and then choose the next student. This student has 2 goals, and I can see that on the drop down, and the data is added to the dashboard. If I scroll over and look at the chart, it's a little bit hard to read. What I need to do is I need to hide columns or rows that have no data in them. I can do that by finding the last row of data here, and again right-clicking on those rows to hide them. And now I see that the data adjusts on the chart. Here I have 3 empty columns for goals that the student does not have, and it's showing up on the chart with empty descriptions. So if I highlight those columns and hide these as well, that information is formatted correctly. So since the student has 2 goals, these can be hidden as well. It doesn't affect any data on the chart, but when I print it, it makes more sense to show just the 2 goals here so that everything matches up. And then I can select this area, choose selected cells here, and format my printout to look the way that I want it to look. Unhide everything. Delete these cells here. Let's take a look at what you would do if you just reported on the student and now you've created new goals for that student after an IEP meeting. And either the mandate stayed the same or it was changed, in which case I can indicate that here if I wanted to, but it's not required. And because I'm working with the student, I'd like to highlight him on the table so that it's a little easier for me to view. And now I see all of the instances for the student are being highlighted. If I were to go into the chart, I only see 1 instance. And now we know the student no longer has 5 goals, but 3 goals. So to avoid this looking like a duplicate, just enter something in the space here that lets you know that these are previous goals. So that now when you look at the chart, the drop-down will show you the previous history, and it'll show you the new goals as well. If you had a lot of students on your caseload, I only have a few for the demo, then the highlight is going to show you that student throughout the sheet, which may be helpful in entering new data for the student. So here we see that perhaps the student's IEP was held in August, and now that we're in September, I can start adding new data for that student in the new goals. It's also possible that the IEP dates overlap in a particular week. So for example, this student's IEP could have been on August 15th, And now the new data is going to be collected August 16th or later, depending on the day of the week that you meet with that student. So my data for the student could very well start here, which wouldn't be a problem. So if we take a look at that on the chart, now we would select the new goals for that student. And since we know that there are 3, I'm just going to hide these right now. And since we know that the new goals are being tracked at some point in the middle of this week, this section here should be blank, so I'm going to hide those. There aren't many data points on this chart, but I'm going to hide these rows anyway to take a look at them on the chart. And here we see how those goals are starting to look. In any case, when you have a student who has an IEP and then their services for the new goals pick up after a certain date, the first section here is likely going to be blank, and that section isn't blank for the previous set of goals. And that's just how that works. So I'm going to delete this and reset my chart. If I delete this cell here, these highlighting formats will be removed. Okay, so now let's take a look at the instructions in detail. There are some required fields that you cannot delete, as well as some fields that you can manipulate to customize. So let's take a look. First, when you initially set up your caseload, you're going to set your service dates. And if you click here, you're going to see where that start date is, and it's here. So you would select this date here and set your calendar. And here it's letting you know that each time you open the file, the current month in the header fields are going to be highlighted red just to show you the current period. Next month when I open it, it'll highlight October, then November, and so on. And so here are formulas in the header field that you should not delete. It's highlighting here to let you know that there are formulas in here that you can't edit. And it's just set up to look a little cleaner, as opposed to seeing this, which represents May 3rd, and this, which represents May 10th. It's not necessary to see that, so I've just highlighted them so that they won't appear. Once you set up your service dates, then you can add your caseload. And each of these links here will take you to those required fields. So the student name is here. The goal number. It's going to bring you to each required field. Goal description from the IEP, and a brief summary of the goal. After you set up your caseload, then of course you start to take your data, and you enter the data into this table here. This is the highlighting tool that I went over, where you can select the student's name and then have that student be highlighted on your table so that you can find and enter the information a little easier. And just delete it when you're done. And now we move on to the progress chart, where we have the 2 sections, the reporting dashboard and the progress chart itself. So here it's just highlighting to show you which section you would not print. Here's the section that you would print. And in the section that you do print, here it's outlining where you can edit information. So for each IEP meeting, you would change this information. The age is going to be calculated based on the date of birth that you enter here and the date of your IEP. You have the option of changing this icon if you wanted to. And of course, feel free to change any of the information that's showing here. You can set up whatever information in these fields that you want. When you have an IEP meeting coming up, these are the steps to follow so that you keep a history of the old goals with the new goals by adding expired or inactive to the student's name. And then we add that student to the bottom of the table along with the new goals and new mandate if there is a change to the mandate. And you just continue to add the data points every week. And as I mentioned, sometimes the data might overlap within a week. So if you have an IEP meeting on Monday, you may very well be taking data for the new goals on the next available day. So it is possible to have those dates overlap. but you won't run into any problems when you generate your reports. So these are the fixed fields that are on the table, all the way up through 52 weeks. Hidden here, column A contains formulas that cannot be edited. You cannot delete this column, therefore it's been grouped so you don't need to see it. But what this column does is it allows the charting tab here to show the appropriate listing here and provides you with the listing of student name and goal. You can collapse that column by grouping it. This is the information that you need. In addition to the required fields, there's some optional columns that you can use in case you want to track other things like IEP dates, classroom, teacher name, things like that. So here are those fields. If you click on this, it will take you directly to that section. You can relabel the column headings to change the descriptions here for what you capture. You can add additional columns if you want more by clicking on this section here. Insert 8 columns to the right. When you do that, you can format your columns however you want. If you don't want to capture any additional information, you can highlight it and then right-click on the column letters and then just choose Delete Columns. If you're not sure whether or not you may want to use those columns at some point, again, highlight those columns, right-click on the column letters, and choose Group. It's going to create this grouping, and then you can just hit this little minus and it will collapse it. And then later, if you wanted to use it, you can come back here and hit the plus, and then go ahead and use those columns. Okay, some final hints and tips. Every time you open this file, it's going to open to the first tab. You can drag and drop this sheet all the way off to the end so that every time you open it, you're opening to this table here, and you can just go in and enter your data. If you're familiar with the file and you don't want to see the instructions anymore, just click on this down pointing triangle and then select Hide Sheet. It will go away. You get a pop-up message here. But if you hover over this icon here to see all sheets, you will see that that instructions tab is still there. And if you wanted to bring it back up, you can just click on it and it brings the sheet back. I'm going to slide this back to the front. And that's the information for the weekly progress chart. The data collection template is available as a separate file, but when it's part of the weekly chart file, it runs off of this caseload table here. So the information that you enter in this column here will be what's populated in these fields here. And now I know that that student now has 3 goals, so I'll reselect that student and the goals will be refreshed. We're going to take a look at this data collection template as well as the 3-month caseload tracker in a separate video. But for now, that's everything there is for the weekly caseload progress monitoring chart. Thank you for watching.